doing what we can with whatever we got. I feel so fortunate to be a part of it. So here we go. All right, it's 9 o'clock. And this is our first YPID, Young Partners in Development Hangout. And I'm hanging out here with Dr. Philip Cook. And Philip, I believe you're up on Pender Island.
That's correct.
And with Barbara Jefferson here in Seattle. Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
All right, so then this is our first in a series on empowered youth empowering society. And our goal is to make it easy for people to connect and discover each other, and for young partners in development to highlight the work of incredible youth-led organizations and inspiring youth leaders like you, Barbara. And Philip, I thought that we'd start by talking a little bit about young partners in development, and you can introduce yourself in the process, and we can use that as to setting the context for what YPID is and what we're up to. So Philip, why don't you pick it up from here?
Sure. Young Partners in Development originated as part of a global partnership between our organization, the International Institute for Child Rights and Development at the University of Victoria, and youth-led organizations around the world. And I think it springs from a desire to connect and showcase and energize a lot of the really innovative work that young people are doing these days, and particularly perhaps to create stronger partnerships between academic organizations who are involved in engaged training and research, supporting young leaders through service learning, through participatory action research, through social justice programs, and to look at the opportunities for creating stronger linkages between the local and the regional and the global. There's a lot of focus at the moment on youth-led initiatives, and we felt it would be opportune to take the time to better understand where the innovation's happening and to connect that innovation and see how we can create stronger partnerships between organizations such as ourselves, applied organizations at universities, and the good work that young people like Barbara and others are doing globally. So we started this process more formally about 6 months ago by creating the Young Partners in Development program, and we're hoping to learn to help share the learning both through our own networks and through the UN agencies who are part of this as well, UN Habitat, UN Development Program, UNICEF, and others, and also to look at opportunities to support young leaders through accredited learning. So one of the things that we're starting at Royal Roads University and in partnership with universities in Latin America and Southeast Asia is an accredited undergraduate, master's, and doctoral program, which will also be called Young Partners in Development, which will allow young leaders to be accredited for work that they're doing in community while staying in community and being connected through a community of practice with other youth leaders.
Yeah, Phil, maybe you can go through those 4 levels that we've talked about for Young Partners in Development.
Sure. Well, the first level is really a community of practice that anybody can engage in. If people go to the Young Partners in Development website, they'll see that community of practice. The budding community of practice is just starting. And that's a place where we're looking to showcase innovation. I think that's really the first objective of this whole initiative, is just to get the word out, to showcase the innovation that's going on, particularly in terms of systems change, actual impact that young people are having on their communities, on their governments, regionally and globally. And so that's the first level of engagement. And another level of engagement would be to be more actively engaged in sharing, which would be part of a more formalized membership that people have, where you're part of a group and you're actively engaged in sharing specific information. A third level would be to have some of that work be accredited, so to take individual courses in Young Partners in Development, not just through our own university, but through other universities. So we're part of a formal partnership at the moment with Columbia University in New York. As I mentioned earlier, I think Chiang Mai Regional Center for Sustainable Development in northern Thailand, Sinde in Colombia, University of Goiás in Brazil, and others. So there would be opportunities to receive credit for individual courses that people are taking, and then the fourth level down would be to participate in a full degree program in Young Partners in Development at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral level. And as I mentioned, that would be both a distance program. So we already actually are starting a cohort of young people in the Mekong region of Southeast Asia. So these will be youth leaders from northern Thailand, Burma, which is quite interesting given the situation that's emerging in Burma right now with citizen engagement, Laos, and Vietnam, and supporting them through Chiang Mai University at the bachelor's level, where they will be staying in their community, continuing the work that they're doing with their NGOs, but being accredited through that, and then coming together twice a year for residencies as part of that program.
Yeah. And Philp, I'm curious too about your take. We've just finished the Youth Governance, Peace Building, and the Role of Social Media conference. And in fact, we're going to talk later about that conference report. But they're talking about this shift, this new paradigm, this youth-led paradigm. And Barbara, in the Generation Waking Up video, talks about this being the first global generation. And I can't help but, when I hear you speak, Philp, and realize you have this global perspective on what's going on. Is there a common theme that you're seeing through the youth that you're engaging with all over the world? Is there a youth movement that's waking up? Is that such a phenomenon that you're witnessing in your travels and engagement?
Well, Barbara could probably speak to that more eloquently than I could. I don't know if I don't think there's a youth movement. I think there are a number of youth movements. It's a complex phenomena. I mean, young people are engaged in it. I think one thing that we can say is, first and foremost, we're living in a time in the world where there are more young people on this planet than ever before, particularly youth between the ages of 15 and 25. That's just a demographic reality. I think we're also seeing an impatience within that cohort, where young people aren't willing to just wait for older folks, particularly for governments, to take the lead, or the private sector, or the UN for that matter, to take the lead in managing the great global challenges that face us at the moment, whether it's climate change or deep poverty, deep inequalities in many countries, conflict, HIV/AIDS, whatever. And I think young people are taking the initiative at the community level, particularly in creating real change, and I think using tools in ways that we haven't seen before. And that's the social media phenomena that has resulted in some of the great changes that are going on in the Middle East right now with the Arab Spring, but in a lower level way are happening in many other countries that I'm seeing globally at the moment as well. So I think there are many youth movements. I think what's interesting right now is that many of those movements are connecting with each other. So you've got this globalized network that's also becoming more prolific and powerful, I think, as part of that emerging phenomena. And that's the piece that we're interested in.
Very good, very good. Well, why don't we move to Barbara, and let Barbara, you enter in that conversation. Take a minute or two and introduce yourself, Barbara. I'm going to highlight you here, and it's great again to have you with us. And say a little bit about yourself and the work you're doing, and then how your take is on this global generation and the emergence of youth at this moment in time.
Absolutely. Thank you, John, for having me today. I have been deepening into this work with an incredible group of young people, mostly here in the Seattle area, but also across the United States, who, as has been said, are unwilling to wait any longer, who are hungry for change and are willing to step in any ways that we can to begin to create the change that we want to see in our communities. I've been working with Generation Waking Up for a little over a year now, and well, I think my story actually starts when I was much younger. Growing up here in Seattle, Washington, I came from a broken home, a very troubled background as a child, just with a lot of challenges in my family and in my community that I couldn't comprehend, and I had no language for, really. And I grew up really just active and involved as much as I could in my school, because that's where I found the love and the support that I was really looking for in life. But as I got to be a teenager and really began to see out into the world what the challenges were just globally, I think I went into somewhat of a shock. And I didn't have that network. I didn't have other young people that I saw who were aware and who were ignited and who were active. And I think when we face challenges without options for action, we get very defeated. And so I grew up feeling very helpless, unaware of the power that I possessed, and just kind of apathetic is what it led to. And I remained that way for quite some time, always aware of the challenges, but really uncertain of what I could do. And when I came into contact with Generation Waking Up, I showed up at a leadership training that they had, and within the first 3 minutes, I knew that this was an opportunity that was going to change my life. It was the first time that I met a group of young people who were engaged, who were fired up, who were creating change and searching for it, and just relentless in their efforts to serve their communities. And since then, it has been such a life-changing process of coming into my own power, really seeing the opportunities that are ahead of us in these challenges, seeing the challenges as opportunities, and really connecting to those networks of both elders and youth who are creating these changes, innovations all across the board. And Generation Waking Up was really the foundation for me, and has been the foundation for a lot of young people in making that transformative step into service and into their power. And I think, as it was said, it's not necessarily a youth movement that's happening, but we have the numbers now. There are more of us on this planet than ever, and we do have the tools that are making it possible for us to educate ourselves, for us to connect with one another across lines of difference all around the world, and equip ourselves, empower ourselves with the tools I believe that we're really ready to engage our communities in. So it's been a really exciting year since coming into contact with Gen Up. I have launched recently a couple of programs that are making their way through our communities. One is called Summer of Solutions Seattle, which is a part of a national organization called Grand Aspirations. And we are all about discovering the solutions. We believe that the solutions to our challenges already exist, and it isn't a matter of reinventing the wheel or necessarily inventing something, but really tapping into what's already out there and making those connections, really building those networks. So we've set out for the last 8 weeks all across Seattle to discover, experience, document, and amplify the solutions. And we've launched a campaign online called Yes We Are, where we broadcast those solutions through video, through photography, and journalism. And that's really one of our first steps, I believe, in getting engaged and inviting our generation into this movement, is allowing the youth to see that it can happen, that change can happen, and that it's happening right now. And for me, that was one of my biggest steps.
That's right. In addition to Summer Solutions, though, you're doing young women in leadership, right?
Yeah, as I've been getting more engaged, I've definitely recognized fewer and fewer women really in leadership, and definitely fewer women of color. So I partnered with a friend in the Bay Area who's also a Generation Waking Up facilitator, and we've designed a 2-week program that we're launching this summer actually. In a couple of weeks, I'm setting off for Bali, where we're gathering together with women from all over the world, ages 18 to 30, to deepen into feminine leadership and what it really means to be a woman on the planet at this time, and how we can leverage our inherent capabilities as women to really lead our communities forward. So that is launching on the 17th, and I'm thrilled. Yeah, we're in the midst of the finale of our fundraiser, and we've just got a team of 14 young, incredible women who are fired up about this opportunity.
Right. Well, while we have the fundraising topic, let's just let folks know if they want to. They can go to the Young Partners in Development site, and on the event page they can have links. There are links to the work that you're doing, Barbara. People can go and contribute there, as well as find out more information. Is there still room for folks to come to Bali and go with you?
There is. There's still room. Our application process has closed, but if there are any young women who feel like this opportunity is right for them, we are open to accepting others to join us. There's definitely at least room for another 6 young women. So we'd be happy to hear from anyone. And for those of you who can't necessarily make it to Bali but do want to contribute in some way, please do consider making a contribution to our Indiegogo campaign. This fundraiser is to cover the financial needs of those young women who are coming from networks or families where they don't necessarily have the resources to afford an opportunity like this. We've kicked off a collective fundraiser, and all of our young women are teaming up together to raise the money for those in need. So we would love your support if you feel called to invest in our empowerment.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, let's go back to Generation Waking Up. So tell us more about, and I know there's a connection with the Pachamama Alliance, and maybe you can illuminate for us that relationship and the roots of Pachamama Alliance and how Generation Waking Up emerged and what's its purpose.
Yes, absolutely. Well, starting off with the purpose of Generation Waking Up, which gives me goosebumps every time I hear it or say it, but it is to ignite a generation of young people to bring forth a thriving, just, sustainable world. And that encompasses a lot, but the reality is that all of those elements, our own personal happiness and thriving, the environmental sustainability and social relationships, they're all interconnected. So as we work in any one of those sectors, we're working in them all, really. So with that purpose, Generation Waking Up has set up a few different avenues for really making that happen, and one level of that is the Wake Up. And the Wake Up is a 3-hour multimedia interactive experience for young people to really come into self-awareness, awareness of where we are in the world right now, and then looking at what our opportunities are as young people, what can change in our lives, and how we can bring forth that change and move from that place of awareness into committed action, into engagement. And this was developed actually out of a symposium that the Pachamama Alliance created. They are our sister, like mother organization, and they were birthed in 1995 out of a call from the Ashwar people down in the Amazon. After some work with Bill and Lynn Twist there in Ecuador, the Ashwar people said, you know, it's not enough for you to just help us here. They were helping them protect their land. But what really has to happen is a change in the dream of the modern world, in the mind of man. And so the Pachamama Alliance formed, and they set out to come back to the modern world and do just that, really change the consciousness, the mind, the dream of our society. And so this symposium was created to really walk people through these 4 questions that allow them to kind of wake up, in a sense, which are, who are we, just as individuals and humanity? Where are we at this moment in time, in history? And then what has to change? What is just not working? What is not serving us or our fellow humans or planet? And then what do we do now? Getting into that action. And so through that symposium, Generation Waking Up came alive. There was really a need to adapt this for young people, because we have that capability to really change our lives. We've got a lot less to lose, in a sense. And so it was adapted 2 years ago for young people, and it has just been on fire since then. We just wrapped up a week-long leadership training here in Whidbey Island, where 50 young people from all over the world, coming from Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Cameroon, young people from all over the world who are hungry from change, coming to deepen into those 4 questions and into their leadership. And Generation Waking Up continues to bring forth that model, as well as a new one, which is creating more of a consistent hub for young people, which is called Thrive Hub, where we're learning how to really build community and develop those networks and communities of practice, so we can continue to nurture one another and strengthen in this movement.
Yeah, I want to hear more about the Thrive Hub, but I want to bring you in, Philip, if you want to dialogue with Barbara and ask her any questions about Generation Waking Up.
Yeah, maybe, well, a couple of things. First of all, I think it's really interesting, the notion of waking up, because I think we do need more tools to stimulate mindfulness in the world today. I think there's the challenge of the need for more rapid and intensive change, but also a need in a way to slow down and create more mindfulness as we go through this. And I think it's not ironic, perhaps, that message is coming from the indigenous people. I mean, a lot of our work is also with indigenous people. In fact, I was just at a gathering a couple of weeks ago of 600 elders and youth up in northern British Columbia, which was equally powerful, and similar messages coming forward from the elders in those communities about the need to create intensive change, but to be very mindful about how we do that. So maybe, I guess, a question, Barbara, is what have you learned in terms of the balancing between that notion of mindfulness, because it's at the heart of your message when I hear the concept of generation waking up, and the need for rapid change at the same time, and what have you learned perhaps through that process? It's inspiring to hear you talk about those things.
Yeah, well, one thing that I've learned is that the key, I believe, is transformation rather than change. It's really in that state of mindfulness, recognizing what is functioning here, what is serving here, and how can we, as it said, like usher out the old dying world and really midwife this new world into being through, I believe, supporting what is working. And it's been my experience that it's been a matter of identifying what needs to change and going to the heart of that, and offering opportunities for change. So, for instance, one project that's been happening here, an organization called Sustainable Works, will come into small businesses or homes and offer to take away, any products or things that are toxic in your homes, and replace them with things that support the local economy, that are safe in our water, things like that. That's just a very simple kind of metaphor for this idea. But as far as the mindfulness goes, I think it is the very heart of it all. And in the time for rapid change, it's dangerous, because the effects of making the wrong decisions, as we've seen, are just ripple out for years. And it's really the reflection is what's key as well. Reflecting, and the whole system's thinking, reflecting not only on the stream from which something came, but thinking into the future, far into the future, deeply about the effects that it will have. We're really infusing everything we do with more mindfulness, with simply meditation, and with that kind of upstream, downstream thinking, in order to allow people to really process that. And that activity alone has created more change in people's behavior and habits, and even consumerism, than anything else that I've seen.
Yeah, what I've noticed is the use of social media. I mean, everybody's aware of this. Whenever you go into a meeting now, or you're meeting, or just seeing people on the street, everyone's got these devices in their hands. And at first I said, boy, I mean, people are so distracted. They're so tuned into other worlds. And I realized that actually maybe they always were actually distracted and tuned into other worlds. But now that they have these devices in their hands, you can visibly see that they're not listening and they're tuning into something else. And that opens this huge opportunity. During the conference, I referenced Howard Rheingold's book, Net Smart. And he talks about mindful digital citizenship, Philp and Barbara. Mm-hmm. And he talks about 5 literacies. And the first, and really the foundational literacy, is attention. And that the opportunity for us is to learn how to manage our attention. And to know how to bring focus and bring awareness, and the practices, the metacognition, the meditation, these I think are going to become essential for us as we realize that we need to pay attention. We need to bring focus. There's a distinction between multitasking and task switching. Where a lot of people think they can multitask when really what they're doing is just 2 or 3 things poorly at the same time, as opposed to being able to truly multitask. So bringing awareness to how we are aware and thinking about how we're thinking and bringing more mindfulness is definitely, I agree with that thread here in this conversation, is one of the essential elements for what's going to take to really use social media mindfully and intelligently, to use the connectivity we have to really focus and bring about the kind of changes needed.
Yeah, one field of practice that I've been incorporating into my life a lot more in the last couple of years has been meditation, and specifically Vipassana meditation. And after the retreat with the young women in Bali, we'll be returning back to the States for a 10-day silent meditation where it is about that mastery of attention and sharpening the mind. And the more that I deepen into it, the more I see how crucial it is to incorporate that into not only our daily lives, but just into our practices in organizations as we are working to develop daily practices, morning practices into this work. Makes a huge difference. And I believe that I'm also seeing the need to somewhat decompartmentalize our lives, where we have our service work, we have our self-care over here, and we put the meditation over here, we put the community work over here, and then family in a different category. And there's this need now to really bring those all together, to see how we can bring our families into our service, how we can bring our self-care into our community, our meditation into our workplaces, and develop a more synergy amongst them all. I believe that that's going to be one of the ways to really balance this work as we're moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you say that, Barbara, because we've been thinking a lot about that with this curriculum that we're developing, and at the center of the curriculum is a notion of self-awareness and self-understanding, and this concept of development from the inside out, that you have development from the bottom up ideally, that it starts from community and goes up, but really it has to start from the inside out. It's like Gandhi said, you need to be the change you want to see, and so it's really nice to hear you say that. And similarly, we're thinking that concept of fostering mindful compassion with a type of practice. Maybe it's a Vipassana practice, maybe it's a traditional indigenous practice, depending on where people are located, and maybe it's within your Islamic community. But I think you find that notion in almost every community around the world, and that's part of, I think, going deep into the roots of our human DNA to reclaim these teachings that are so needed, I think, in the world today. But it's it's interesting to hear you say that. I guess one of the other questions I would have is I think the real challenge working and supporting youth movements, it isn't youth, it's actually adults at the end of the day, and it's kind of the old systems and how we change those systems. A lot of our focus actually, while we're supporting youth movements, is actually on training adults to be more responsive and open, and maybe changing those things that are more kind of encrusted in terms of old behavior patterns and unhealthy practices and at the antithesis of some of the things that we're talking about. What's your experience there? How do you, what are some of your lessons in changing those older patterns? Because that's really, I think, the real challenge before us is how we tackle some of those issues.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I'm at this place now where I'm kind of in between being youth and adult, like in the role that I play. So I come across that challenge sometimes in myself, and then I find myself also needing to challenge authority from that like youthful perspective in the way of, you know, asking them to open and try to challenge those old ways. But I definitely agree with you that that is the biggest challenge. And it's I think the solution lies in an intergenerational dialogue. I don't think it lies with either or. I think the youth we are still learning what tools there are available to us and how to equip ourselves with those. And adults are also, or our elders are still also learning like what our real needs are, like what will allow us to really step into our highest potential and how they can support that and kind of get out of their own way. And one tool that I've been finding effective is experiential activities. Mm-hmm. I've been using, I studied theater out of high school. I studied experimental theater and Balinesian mask and dance. And so I have a lot of experiential like movement activities, and I've been incorporating those a lot into helping people get out of the patterns of our minds and back into that curious space of being open and fascinated and flexible. And I think we have to come back to the drawing board together because children, a lot of us know what we want and we know what excites us and we know exactly, I mean, we could tell you what you could do best to draw our attention and lead us the right way, but at the same time, we still are unaware of the path ahead and the tools that have already been created. And I think coming back to that think tank together is the best method. But until then, I would suggest definitely incorporating experiential activities and theater and movement into spaces where you would think it may not be the most beneficial, but really is.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a wise teacher who told my daughter, I have a 22-year-old daughter, and she says young people, they don't realize they're often drowning in a 3-foot pool of water. And what I think she was meaning by this is that, you know, Sophie, my daughter, said she'll feel like, oh my God, I'm drowning, and not realize it's only a 3-foot pool of water. Mm-hmm. And that it looked so serious at that time, but she doesn't realize that, no, you're going to make it, and that the world is full of deeper and deeper pools. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a very insightful way of framing what it's like to be young and not yet realize that this 3-foot pool of water is really, you can handle it. And there's many other pools yet to come.
Well, I think what it was also said that the youth are the elders in universe time. And there is kind of this oscillation back and forth between who is really holding the wisdom, you know.
Right.
And I think our elders bring us a lot of wisdom through experience, and our youth bring us a lot of wisdom through innocence and through that curiosity and openness. And I find myself, when I'm with some of my youth, I lead a program here in Seattle also called Ground Up Organics, where we teach middle schoolers and high schoolers urban agriculture and farming. And sometimes I just have to completely take the back seat and allow myself to be led and allow myself to be taught and find the balance in when it's time to lead and really direct and offer my wisdom, and when it's time to just learn from them and their ability to just adapt so quickly to new tools and changes and their creativity. And I'm constantly learning from them. So I think in finding, you know, that way of breaking through our old habits, some of it really lies in being led by some of the youngers.
Right, right. One of the concepts we've been talking about at YPID is this notion of intergenerational equity.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Philip, this might be a good bridge also to some of what Ban Ki-moon has been saying, the need for this global uprising of youth to be really an opportunity for a global transformation, but that we've got to provide the voice and opportunities and resources to this next generation. And I know there's lots of changes happening in the UN. I don't know if you want to speak to any of what you see at that level in terms of making space and room at the table for youth in a new way.
Yeah. Well, it's too bad our good friend and colleague Ravi Kakara isn't here from UN Habitat, because he's really been a lot closer to this and is part of our network, and unfortunately couldn't join us today. But yeah, well, and again, I think partly as a result of the Arab Spring, the powers that be and the larger systems that be, in this case the United Nations, has realized that greater attention needs to be given to the emerging phenomena of youth movements and youth empowerment. And as a result of that, Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, has identified youth engagement as one of his top 3 priorities, as I understand. And so there is a new UN youth agenda called Youth 21 that UNDP and UN Habitat are leading right now. And the UN itself is going through a process where over the next 6 months, as I understand it, each UN agency, so this would be the big UN agencies like UNDP, UN Women, UNICEF, WHO, etc., are required to develop a mandate to support youth movements and youth engagement within their programming, whatever their focus is, whether it's on poverty alleviation or peace building or healthcare services, HIV/AIDS, etc. And this is quite important. Initially I think there was perhaps a more limited focus on youth employment because people are realizing that a lot of the frustration that young people have in the world today is just because they can't get jobs. But I think there's been some pushback on that also, and a realization that it's got to be bigger than just youth employment. It's really much more about creating open, responsive, democratic systems of citizenship at the end of the day, where young people have more power and say in the world around them. And that we need to, as we're talking about in this conversation today, be listening to young people, not just providing them with solutions and inviting them into old systems that aren't really working. So, I mean, having worked with the UN for some time, I'm not holding my breath for really rapid change here, but it is quite significant. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it'll be important when those new opportunities come down to the ground. That's what I'm looking for. So in some of the countries where we're working, whether it's Southeast Asia or Latin America or Canada for that matter, where there will be more resources made available to young people. For example, Barbara, you were mentioning, young women's leadership program. Well, as far as I know, UN Women is going to be beginning an initiative of exactly that nature, where they will be focusing on providing more resources to young women leaders. And maybe part of our role as part of this network is to create those linkages so that the young women that you're working with or connecting with in Bali can be also networked with some of these new UN programs that will be starting up. There'll be more focus in these Hangouts, John, in the months ahead on that UN initiative. There is also, I should mention, a UN focal point for youth now. Nicholas Shepard in New York is creating the position that will be filled over the next few months, so there will be a youth, hopefully a youth. We're anticipating chosen by Ban Ki-moon to advise him, and there'll be a specific office within the UN to focus on coordinating UN activities relating to youth. There's also, by the way, an interesting discussion going on right now in terms of the new Millennium Development Goals. The MDGs were the framework that guided all UN agencies and gave them targets and benchmarks and things towards which they were working, and they will expire or finish in 2015. And most of them at the moment focus on women and children, so things like mother's mortality during birth and children's access to school, health care for young children and things like this. And there's a lot of discussion right now that the next generation of Millennium Development Goals, they may be called the Sustainable Development Goals, should have a much stronger focus on youth. And this is a good area for young people to have engagement in at the moment with some of those UN agencies I was mentioning earlier, because I think it's really important that young people's aspirations and the work that they're doing are reflected in that new set of global goals, because those will be the goals that most countries will be working towards in terms of their broader mandates and agendas.
Yeah, and I want to encourage folks that are watching this, whether they're watching live or through the recording of this, that youngpartnersindevelopment.org is the site where we're going to continue to build out this platform to connect youth leaders, to empower youth, to make it easy to discover each other and share creatively knowledge and resources with each other. And Barbara, I want to give you another chance to put the word out as to resources that you're needing for your projects. There are links on the event page, but I also want to give you a chance to share one more time on the different programs and ways that people can contribute to the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, you can visit our Yes We Are campaign that was created by Summer of Solutions Seattle by going to our website, sosseattle.org, where you can see the stories that we've been harvesting, the solutions that we've been harvesting all around Seattle. You can also donate there to our fundraising to take care of the stipends for our participants of this summer. And for those really interested in the Young Women's Leadership Program that I talked about, we have about 11 days left, and our fundraiser is really jamming. And again, this is to support the financial needs of some of our participants. And you can visit the link there on our site to make a generous donation to our campaign and also read more about our program, our mission and purpose, and the young women who will be a part of this summer's training.
And what's that website's URL? That
is youngwomensleadershipbali.weebly.com.
Okay, .weebly, W-E-B-L-Y or L-E-Y?
W-E-E-B-L-Y.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, please visit both sites and check it out. We have a lot of content and just a lot of exciting information and young people to connect to. So.
Yeah, Barbara, you're such a gift. It's so great to be able to have you on our first Hangout here.
Thank you.
And I can tell that there's other people chiming in and sending me notes. I don't want to be distracted, but at the same time, I want to spend a few minutes reflecting on the conference report, which we're just releasing now. This is from the conference we had on June 26th and 27th at the University of Victoria on youth, peace building, youth governance, peace building, and the role of social media. And there's actually a group on the Young Partners in Development site that will contain, it has the conference report, the full report, and we're going to be making videos, clips from the panels that we had, as well as access to the entire panels. So that's available there. I don't know, Philip, if you've had a chance to read the latest draft of it. I've spent a little bit of time with it. One of the main themes is this paradigm shift that's happening. You mentioned the metaphor before about midwifing the new while hospicing the old. There is this kind of sense that we are at this turning point. It was really well done by Michelle Zilio, who prepared a catalog of some of the solutions that were talked about at the conference. And I want to encourage people to go take a look at the report. And also want to give us a chance to look back on that conference, what that conference was for us, any insights we had while we were together, and reflections that have occurred since. There's been a lot of emails coming to me. In fact, Esma is going to be our featured change maker for next week. This is the Libyan youth moving, Saba. Philip, maybe you can remind me, what is the name of her organization? I will get it while we're talking here. Sure. I want to make sure we put the word out for that. But I want to give each of you a chance to any thoughts and reflections since the conference on what we accomplished in those 2 days together.
Well, actually, just a minor correction there, Johnny. I think the next webinar is going to be next month,
yes.
not next week. But
yes,
well,
next month. Sorry.
Sure. Well, I think it highlighted the creative ways that young people are using social media at the local level through e-governance, for example, where local governments in Portland, Oregon, for example, somewhere closer to home, are trying to learn how to become more responsive, or Vancouver is actually another example, to citizen engagement via Twitter, internet, Facebook, etc. And I think recognizing some of the challenges through that process, but also seeing this as a really exciting emergent phenomena, and particularly finding ways that more vulnerable communities, we do a lot of work in the downtown east side of Vancouver, so finding ways in which those more marginalized, socially excluded communities can be engaged in governance issues. So we had a lot of really interesting discussion on the changing dynamics of governance, the way decisions are being made at the local level, and I think particularly in cities, and this is an interesting phenomenon, whereas more and more people are moving to cities, to finding more innovation in some ways in some of the urban centers at the moment. There was also a lot of conversation, and we had some representatives from the Middle East in terms of how young people were using, are using. We had people from Syria, for example, talking about the Syrian diaspora and ways in which young people are engaging in social justice movements in those countries, and the really positive things that have happened in countries like Egypt, for example, where we have new forms of government, the existing challenges that young people are facing, where they were very much on the front lines of social change when governments were being overthrown, but they're not necessarily being engaged in the same ways afterwards, and new tools that are coming forward to support some of those movements. So street to cloud, for example, ways in which young people can be using cell phones even when governments are shutting down social media sites, and new opportunities are emerging for technology to be creating greater social space for young people to be engaged in discourse and to challenge governments when they're not being responsive to their citizens. And I think we also then talked about ways that we need to continue to push this space or open the space, because there are still many communities and countries where young people don't necessarily have those opportunities to use these tools. So we were looking at ways in which greater opportunities could be made available to young Indigenous people, for example, living in very remote parts of Canada or other parts of the world who don't necessarily have those kinds of opportunities right now. And Barbara, you were part of that conversation, so you probably have other insights as well.
Mm-hmm.
It is Shabab Libya, by the way, is the organization that Esma is involved with, and it will be next month that she'll be on the Hangout. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Barbara, let me go to you there. Maybe you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal experience, just really seeing, once again, what is happening, like the young people that are really just bringing forth some amazing work, and the solutions for bringing young people into that. I think the more that I see the potential, the more inspiration I feel, and it was an incredible opportunity to be a part of that. One big thing I took away from that was the power of social media. I mean, the experience itself of bringing voices in from all over the world through video, as we are now connecting over video and being able to have this dialogue and then stream online for anyone and everyone all over the world with access to internet to be a part of. Like this alone is so incredible to me. There's so much potential here for the types of meaningful decisions that could be made across so many lines of difference, whether it be geographical or just background. And so I'm watching the emergence happen even as we speak of that potential. And I'm also seeing a lot of young people adapting to these tools so quickly, and seeing how with the right content, these could be life-changing, community-changing discussions.
Yeah. I want to remind you guys of the aims of the conference here, because I think they endure as we go forward with young partners in development. It was sharing youth-led innovation in the areas of governance, peace building, and the role of social media. It was connecting networks of youth-led organizations with adult allies that are working in government, and UN agencies, international non-governmental organizations, and universities, and then exploring the value added that universities can bring to this emerging arena of using social media for social change. And I think that those are good themes that are going to continue through Young Partners in Development.
Absolutely. I love the potential for the education element here as well. We're seeing more just like MIT has basically free school available online where you can go and take courses there for free. You don't necessarily get credit for it, but I'm also just recognizing the power for passing on wisdom, education, resources, and tools through social media platforms, things just such as what we're using right now to bring people together and to reach those communities where, as the marginalized communities, where tools for really like building community, building a thriving community, and implementing very simple means for organizing your communities, like make a huge impact in those areas where there's a lot of just disparity. And I'm speaking for my own community that I come from, just growing up here in Seattle, in the African American community, where there is a lack of organization and on many levels, and a lot of healing that's needing to be done in a lot of cases, lack of access to those resources because many people are coming from poor backgrounds and cannot afford that education. And so I see just the potential in so many arenas for the education to reach far and beyond any ways that it has been in the past due to social media.
Yeah, I mean, Philp, this is a natural for you to build upon, given that the role of universities is being radically transformed by this new medium of communication, and the role of accreditation and the role of learning networks. I know that's core to YPID. I want to give you a chance to, in the closing minutes we have, to start to build upon that.
Yeah, actually, and I wanted to just add or emphasize another dimension to this, which we feel is really important. I think part of it is universities reaching out and creating more opportunities, and in some ways using the opportunities for connectivity that secondary institutions already have, because many of them do have this powerful potential to use online learning, for example, to support youth leaders, or to particularly focus on breaking down barriers to post-secondary education for young people, and especially the more vulnerable populations, Barbara, that you were referencing. But I think there's another really important dimension to this also. As centers of learning, I think universities also need to be more self-critical about learning from youth, and as we're thinking about emerging theories and practice of social change and social justice, I think that the learning arrows, if you will, need to also go more from the community into the post-secondary institutions, and that's one of the things that we're really interested in with this program that we're developing, is changing the theory, or looking at the theory of change in terms of youth movements, where the knowledge base is coming more from the community into universities rather than the other way around. Or maybe there's a more virtuous circle in terms of the way learning is happening, because I think there's a lot of importance to be placed on taking learning that begins with young people's own lived experience and maybe using more of a Paulo Freirean approach to reflexive practice, where you begin with that learning and then you create a body of knowledge that is coming from young people. For example, we're really interested in theory of change that begins with an understanding closer to the real-life problems that people are facing. In Colombia, for example, we have a lot of work focusing on issues of violence in community that's related to narco-trafficking and the ongoing conflict that's been experienced in Colombia for the past 50 or 60 years as a result of the social revolution there. And we're really fascinated by the changes that the hip-hop movement, for example, is bringing to Colombia, where you have very brave young people working in very poor communities in the midst of this conflict, many of whom are really putting their life on the line and using the creative arts and hip-hop and graffiti as a tool for social change. And we think it's important not only to create more opportunities for those young hip-hoppers to access universities and to be accredited for work that they're doing in communities, but that we as academics, as socially engaged academics, should be learning from those people and bringing the lessons that they're bringing into the classroom and into the textbooks that we're creating. So I think there's that aspect of our work which is really important, and that's one of the things we're particularly inspired and excited about in this Young Partners in Development process, is to learn from young people and bring the theory of change from community into the classroom, and then to use university tools like these types of webinars that we're hosting today to share that information more widely. And maybe part of this, going back to our earlier touchstone of our conversation on mindfulness, is to use universities as a space, a reflexive and reflective space where we can come together to have this type of conversation in the midst of this rapid change that we're experiencing. And that could be one of the offerings perhaps that universities could bring. Not that I think at the end of the day universities hold all the wisdom, but perhaps, Barbara, referencing your point, that's a place where we could be more mindful in our conversations and deepen our learning through these types of creative partnerships between youth, between academics, between government agencies, the UN, the private sector. We haven't talked much about the private sector today, but that's a really important part of this conversation as well. And one of the offerings perhaps is that this could be one of those spaces for mindful, reflective conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good, very good. Well, we have just a few more minutes. This is our first Young Partners in Development Hangout in a series we're calling Empowered Youth, Empowering Society. I couldn't think of a better person, Barbara, than to start with you and be able to give a light to the work that you're doing and encouraging others to get involved with you and to join up on youngpartnersindevelopment.org to be able to stay connected. So why don't we take just a closing moment here. Anybody, Barbara, let me start with you. Any things you want to say in closing?
Yes, well, I just want to thank you again for having me. It really is an honor to be a part of Empowered Youth, Empowering Society, as that's been my focus for some time and my passion, really. And I've learned a lot just in our discussion here and really value all of the wisdom that's coming from the both of you and and your commitment to young people and to bringing forth this empowerment and to listening and to learning from all angles, really. I think the opportunity, really, that's ahead of us is continuing to learn how to come together across all those lines of difference, be it age, be it background, be it just simple interest. We're really learning how to decompartmentalize our minds and our lives, bring that mindfulness into the center and that curiosity that really allows us to reflect and make decisions out of love and compassion versus react out of what may be habit or fear. And I'm just excited about the opportunity that we are all stepping into.
Yeah, beautifully said, Barbara, beautifully said. Philip?
Yeah, well, I think Barbara said it. I think just thank you, John, for creating this space. It's a great opportunity, I think, for us. I think it'll be really good to hear what kind of feedback people who've been watching this have. Maybe find ways in the future where we can engage some of the viewers more actively in the conversation. Barbara, it's been a real pleasure listening and speaking with you this morning. I think you embody all the things that we're talking about. So good on you, and we look forward to staying in touch. And thank you for helping launch this in such a good way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there you go. Our first hangout has occurred. We're about to end our hangout. And for those of you who sat with us, I see 15 viewers have been watching with us. We're grateful for that. We want your feedback. We're going to get better at this. We're planning next month in August to do another hangout with Esma from, let me make sure I reference the organization, Shabab Libya, and get her take on the uprising that's happening of youth around the world, and to stay focused on how each of us can use the resources we have the relationships we have to turn what we have into what we need, and to be a part of this amazing awakening and change that's happening. Check out Generation Waking Up, all the good work that Barbara's doing. Philip, thank you. Your leadership and wisdom is awesome. I feel so fortunate to be a part of the work that we're doing. So then for YPID Hangout number 1, I say let's give it a close, and thanks again to everyone who tuned in with us and who watches this in the days to come on demand. Thank you for being a part of this. All right.
Thank you, John.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.